welcome to the last day of Vendep SaaS Camp fall edition with Eric Keating from Appcues. My name is Timo Felin. I'm from Vendep Capital, and we're a Helsinki-based SaaS investor investing into Baltic and Nordic SaaS companies, mainly in the C to Series A stage. So if you're in that stage, feel free to reach out to us when you have a funding round coming up. And of course, outside of those as well, we'll be happy to get to know you guys. A few words about Eric, who's just about to come online. So Eric, he's been heading the marketing function at Appcues as VP of Marketing for coming up to now 3 years. And his experience spans 15 years in SaaS marketing in various roles. So there's a lot to dig into on that front. And he's also the co-founder at PLG Collective, which is a community of growth-minded PLG related folk, or basically people in SaaS hustling about on PLG. So make sure you check that out on productled.org. But what perhaps most people don't know about him, he's also an avid fermenter of sorts. So he's fermented all things from beer to pickles and sauerkraut. So if you throw in some good questions today, I'm sure he'll be happy to share his favorite sauerkraut recipe after the session. Just an idea, Eric. But anyway,
I can try that.
Welcome, Eric. Go ahead and take it away.
Thank you very much, Timo. Appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. And for anybody, Junie answered. For anybody who didn't see the secondary poll, Timo mentioned SaaS cake earlier. I'm just curious what you think that tastes like. Bittersweet, I think, is a pretty good answer. So yeah, thanks again everybody for joining, and thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Again, I'm Eric Keating, head of marketing at Appcues. If you're not familiar with Appcues, we make software that helps other software businesses drive product adoption with in-app onboarding tours, announcements, surveys, etc. No developer required. So just super low no-code tool for really optimizing the product experience to drive growth. I'm here to talk about product-led growth, hopefully better prepare y'all for the PLG journey ahead, regardless of where you're at with it. A little bit more about me, just like why you should listen to me. I spent my entire career in SaaS, really marketing, growth, and GM positions primarily. Launched ZoomInfo's freemium play, their community edition, and acquired the first 10,000 users for that product. And now that's driving really data quality and cleanliness, primary driver of data quality and cleanliness for that organization. I also scaled up Compete.com's freemium product to well over 300,000 free users a month, and then introduced monetization strategies for how to capture more revenue from those users. And we were actually able to pretty much double monthly revenues almost overnight with some changes in the scope of the free product and the paid product. And then for the last year and a half, like Timo said, I've been at Appcues, and we're a product-led business ourselves, but I think the biggest learning or where I've learned the most is through conversations with our customers, and by heading up the product-led growth collective at productled.org. We're having conversations with product-led operators from businesses like Amplitude and IBM, who you might not expect is getting heavy into PLG, but really great minds sharing firsthand accounts of the experiences that they've had operating in a product-led environment. And I will touch on some of those stories today as part of the presentation. And then lastly, just a note, I head up marketing at Appcues, yes, but my team owns not only new business and acquisition, as you'd expect, but also plenty of expansion and retention metrics. My team also manages the use of Appcues within our own product. So very close to it firsthand myself as well.
And Eric,
yeah.
Before you get on, actually, I'll just quickly go through the poll because people are really snappy in responding to this. So in the audience, there's 80% that actually use a demo for getting the people to know the product, and as it was a multiple choice, you could pick others as well. So 40% also have a free trial, and 20% a freemium offering. So that's just something for you to keep in mind. And in the end, on the second question, so if you have a free trial or freemium, which function is responsible for it in the sales funnel? And it seems like sales is the function of choice for many people. 35% say it's sales who's responsible for that, and nothing else really comes close to that. A mix of functions says 20% of the people. So
Okay,
yeah, it seems
great.
to be very sales oriented, or
Yeah,
in that sense.
that's helpful to know. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to spend the first part of this presentation hopefully convincing those who haven't been convinced that they need to have some kind of self-service product experience to introduce one. I'm sure some of you would very much like to, but are frustrated by all the challenges that come along with that, and we'll address some of those as well.
Uh, Quickly, just on the second question, what's your choice? I mean, how would you
Who
organize?
owns it?
Yeah, who should
Yeah.
own that part?
I think it kind of depends on the organization. Now, I will at Appcues, it's collaboratively owned between marketing and product, and that doesn't mean that sales is not playing a very active role in the support and assistance of these free trialers through especially the trialers that are most qualified to be speaking to sales. But in terms of the product experience itself, that's, like I said, collaborative between product and marketing today.
Thanks, makes
Cool.
sense.
So general expectations for today, seems like we're gonna have a good crowd, judging by how quickly y'all responded to that poll. But please ask questions, stop me anytime. I know we're gonna be monitoring chat, and I would love for this to be conversational. So don't hesitate. Be like this person on the right, not like this bored person on the left, is the takeaway here. What we're going to cover today is clarify what product-led growth is and is not. I know I've seen some of the previous presentations, so I'm going to try not to be too redundant there. I think I have more of a little bit of a unique take on it, so hopefully y'all feel the same way. Explain why it's becoming table stakes for all SaaS businesses. So directly addressing some of you who maybe haven't been convinced or haven't made the decision to go all in on it yet. Hopefully convince you that now is the time, and if waiting at all is becoming late at this point. And then really the core of the presentation is sharing some of the stories I've learned or stories I've heard and the lessons learned through my experiences over the last 2.5, 3 years, both working here at Appcues, talking to folks through Product-Led Growth Collective, and also, I guess, through the 15 years of my career where I've primarily operated in what retroactively I would consider product-led environments. So before we get started, I just want to share a little story. So, when I joined Appcues in January 2019, one of my first orders of business was to reevaluate our positioning. So, I went out and spoke with dozens of customers, prospects, thought leaders in the space, et cetera. And product-led growth as a term, it didn't always come up, but as a concept, like what people were describing was very much in the vein of product-led growth. And there were some folks using the word, right? Credit to OpenView and Westbush for being super early to the game there. And then looking at like search interest for the term, it was low, but it was growing. And considering the problems that Appcues solves and solved at the time, I thought it was perfect timing for us to invest in PLG, thought leadership, and education. It's kind of hard to believe, but even just like 2.5 years ago, I had to do a lot of selling internally on this concept. A lot of folks thought, oh, that's just a buzzword, or we don't want to attach our business to this flaky thing that won't even be relevant in a year. And in some ways, it was kind of a buzzword, right? Like until that point, I think all but one of the software companies that I worked at did not have, all but one of the companies I worked at did have a free trial or freemium experience. And then all but one was inherently focused on delivering largely self-service experience. And it's kind of really due to the scale of the user bases. But now it had a name, right? And I understood it, having been through all that. So anyway, one of the first things we did coming out of that was to introduce the Product-Led Growth Collective, as I mentioned. And that's where every couple of weeks I catch up with a product-led operator, ask questions about their journey with PLG. And then out of those conversations come a ton of incredible insights, both from my own learning, but also we publish these, we share these learnings on productled.org. So I highly encourage you to check those out. I'm going to touch on some of those stories today. So all that being said, set the stage with a quick primer. This is how I like to start it off, right? There's been a dramatic shift in the way people buy and use software. We talk about the business impact and business implications a lot, but what's really driving this is the way that people want to buy and use software has changed, okay, whether we like it or not. And I think that's primarily because you just think about our digital experiences as consumers, right? Amazon, super cliche example, but very obvious. Consider, you can log on to Amazon, get whatever you want very quickly without ever talking to a person, and the experience is always very personalized to you. Just super self-service, right? And so many people are using that every day, and that's just one very glaring example of a B2C experience that is just super product-led, right? There's very, very little manual intervention ever. And anybody who buys business software is also a consumer. And those B2C experiences have seriously raised the bar for B2B. There's no difference between me at this point buying B2C software and B2B software. I want to experience it the same way. And there's plenty of data out there to support the argument, right? It's not just my sentiment or anecdote. These stats I probably have to update these soon. I think I pulled them about 1.5 years ago, but 75% of B2B buyers want to self-educate versus talk to sales, right? 60% of users rate personalization as very important in their experience. And then most importantly to me, more than 2/3 of businesses have switched vendors for a more consumer-like experience. Right? Think about how many options there are out there for our buyers. We have more competition than ever. It's easier to spin up new technology than ever. And switching costs are super low because everything's in the cloud, right? And so experience is very important to our users, and we need to pay attention to it. We need to deliver an exceptional experience or they will go elsewhere. We ran a survey earlier this year, almost a year ago at this point, and found that across B2B and B2C SaaS users, 90% of the respondents to the survey preferred using a free trial or freemium access, instead of talking to a salesperson or buying upfront. For those of you curious, that broke down to about 88% in B2B, 92% in B2C, pretty close regardless, right? Also interesting, preference in B2B is far and away trial over freemium, and in B2C, a slight preference for freemium from these results. But what I found even more compelling is that when we asked the question a slightly different way, so asked whether or not they give priority or preference to buying products that they can try for free, 89% of respondents said they do. And that was 87% in B2B, 92% B2C. So, the takeaway there for me is if you're not providing, a free self-serve way for users to experience your product firsthand, you may not even be making the short list, right? And to me, that means that leading with your product is frankly table stakes in most verticals today. So, this is why, we're all in on this product-led concept. The product itself is the primary driver of the customer experience. And that's not only because it's what users expect, because it's just not practical to scale a business by continually adding more and more people, right? So with both sides, there are strong cases. So
Eric, just quickly on the previous poll that you had made, there was a question whether that was asked of business decision makers or actual end users of the product. Which one?
So it was both. We didn't slice and dice the data by ultimate decision maker versus end user. We asked basically what are your preferences as a person, and then when it comes to buying and evaluating B2C software and buying and evaluating B2B software, we asked every respondent both of those questions, since we all these days are doing a little bit of both for the most part.
Right. Makes sense. And I asked the same question from the audience, and people are saying they see that definitely in their customer base as well. And just a note to everybody who's chatting here, do send the chats not only to us as hosts and panelists, but to everybody else. It seems like many are going just to us and not to the rest of the audience. Yeah.
All right, cool. So let's just take a minute to define it. right? So this is how we define it on the PLGC. Obviously, there are some variations of this, but at a high level, business methodology or model in which acquisition, expansion, conversion, retention, really all the growth levers in your business are primarily driven by the product itself. I just want to pause here, reiterate something. I haven't mentioned anything about unit economics or valuations or growth rates or anything like that, right? The product-led movement is a response to users' expectations. And this change is happening with or without you, regardless of whether or not your business even exists, right? And I think that's really important to understand, that this may be a great model for your business, health of unit economics, et cetera. But the primary reason we are doing this, primary reason we're talking about it, is because we need to meet and exceed today's expectations from our users. Okay. So what it is not, I want to be clear about this too. It's not a free trial or freemium product. Sure, very concrete example, visible example of a product-led tactic, probably the most table stakes tactic there is for PLG, but slapping a self-serve account on a product built for enterprises, white glove support, it's not going to work. I know this firsthand. So it is not, introducing a trial or freemium product does not make you product-led. Okay, it's not anti-sales, right? Sales teams have a critical role to play in most product-led businesses, right? Still, some prospects are going to need extra hand-holding. Some will never buy without talking to somebody first. We have a sales team at Appcues that helps people get over kind of the technical hurdle of installation. They're very supportive and consultative in their approach, a bit different in their culture than other sales teams I've worked with, but they still have a very critical role to play. And we still sell the majority of our business through the sales team, even if it's a low touch kind of assistance model. Okay. I think most commonly I've seen PLG change sales, right? So getting them focused. Sales, if you're serving SMBs all the way up to enterprise, or even just a few different market segments in terms of size, sales can now let smaller, lower potential prospects self-serve, focus time and energy on the best fit, highest potential prospects, right? So it can actually be an efficiency boost for sales teams. I've seen, like I said about ours, I've seen our sales team become more consultative, right? Sales team's role changes a bit. It's not just to run a sales process and convince the person to buy, it's to help them realize value, have success with the product. Our team knows that if they can get our best fit trialers to have success in our trial, they're going to be a heck of a lot more likely to close that deal at the end of the day, right? And then another big shift we've seen is a shift to focusing on expansion. So, if the trial or freemium offer can attract and convert new users, the sales team can focus on growing those accounts and expanding. And that usually requires, kind of deeper account research and relationship building, which is something that a sales team is very skilled at already. Okay. And then lastly, this kind of goes back to the first one a little bit. It's not binary. Like it's not a box to check. It's more of a mindset. I've always viewed being product-led as being on a spectrum, right? You can be more or less product-led. It's not just black and white. You can do product-led things without even offering a self-serve product experience. Like for example, you can be very product-led in your approach to support and service, even if you don't offer a trial. So there's a flavor of product-led for everything. And I just think it's really important to acknowledge that you can make progress in this mindset without, having to check a specific box. Okay.
Yeah. And actually, there's a question from Sabet over here regarding, they're in the vacation rental industry, and seems like all these premium and I guess larger vendors, they don't have freemium products. They don't have kind of free trials. It's only the low end market or small companies serving the small and very small customers. So his question is, how can we identify freemium or product led more, I suppose, not freemium only, product-led is for them or not? And I think that's a question that many have on their minds, but from what I take from what you were saying here is that kind of need to think about it in a more broader sense and think about the different aspects of product led that there are, not just the freemium part, because that might not work in your industry, but there are other aspects that might.
Yeah, some of the qualities I think about are, personalization. So how can you make the experience more personalized? Instant gratification is one. Like, how can you make it so that when somebody has an issue, or they need support, or whatever might put kind of throw a roadblock in what they're trying to do, how can you help them get past that as quickly as possible, right? People don't want to wait around. And then what's another? A self-service, right? The more self-service you can make the experience, the better, right? Even if you don't have a freemium or free trial offer.
Right. Makes perfect sense. And also, I mean, just gear everything towards the end user more. I suppose that's
yeah. We've closed more than a handful of very large enterprise deals, starting with an individual user from an individual product line within an organization, right? It's the end user driving the initial sale, and once they're in the door, then our sales team can start to go to that person's peers and other product lines and expand that way, right? But we've seen, like I said, it's not uncommon for enterprises to buy this way as well.
Exactly.
Cool. So just a few examples of what it could mean. I think we kind of just discussed this, but there are different flavors. There are different ways you can become more product led. Like I said, self-service support, being more personalized in the experience, making sure that what the users are experiencing when they're in your product is tailored to maybe actions that they've performed in the past or things they haven't done. In product communications, great way to kind of cut down the time it takes. So you send an email and it sits in somebody's inbox for 24 hours, and now it's 24 hours, less relevant. Or somebody submits a support ticket and has to wait 24 hours to get a response. These are all things that you can make progress toward being more of a self-service, instantly gratifying experiences. So I'm not going to go too deep on this one, but the point is a lot of ways that you can start making progress here. And then on the business side, we have to talk about it, right? There is a very big upside for the business in meeting and exceeding user expectations, and operating your business this way. People ask if trials and freemium makes financial sense a lot when I have these conversations. Is it going to work for unit economics? People worried about giving too much away for free. And the answer to answer that question, I pull some data from OpenView. I should have put a credit on here. Sorry, OpenView. This is yours, OpenView. I pulled this data from you. The data is pretty overwhelming across the board, right? Higher gross margins, faster growth rates, higher customer satisfaction, better retention, lower acquisition costs. It's overwhelmingly a positive story for businesses and unit economics in general. I think the question about does it make sense for every business in SaaS? Absolutely. Maybe not today in your vertical, but regardless of your industry, I think some form of this is going to make sense, right? And even outside of SaaS, just think about all the brands you give preference to because of the quality of their digital experiences. I think about when I fly, which I haven't done a lot of recently. Think about my experience using the JetBlue app. It's a great experience for the most part, and that definitely plays a factor into my preference in terms of who I fly with, right? So just to open your mind a little bit to expand outside of what you might think of as a SaaS business. I think every business is becoming a bit of a SaaS business. Cool. So I'm going to jump into the next section now. This is where I'm going to share some of the stories that I've heard and hopefully provide some, I guess what I like most about sharing these stories is there are people who have done this before, right? There are people who have made mistakes that you could make in your future. There are people who have learned things through trial and error that save you time from having to learn those again. And that's why I want to share these today. Hopefully you'll get ahead of some of these things and better prepare you for your journey in product-led growth. Two of my favorite topics to discuss, and it's kind of what I'll focus on, is transformation stories. So these are what I consider why and how businesses make the shift to product-led and everything they encounter along the way. And then organizational stories. So it's very related to the first, but focused on how operating a product-led business influences the way that you think about internal operations and processes, right? So, hopefully this will be helpful. I'm going to jump into a few of these stories, and like I said earlier, please don't hesitate to ask any questions while we're going. It's a ton we can learn from these folks. So, take a sip of water. Cool. So, for this first story, spoke with Vanessa Dreyfus, who is the VP of Product and Marketing at Unito. If you're unfamiliar, Unito's no-code integration solution, kind of like in the same category as Zapier, makes it easy to connect apps and automate workflows. So Vanessa and her team at Unito saw PLG as kind of a way that they could expand their TAM. They felt like they were at this, if you're familiar with the concept of crossing the chasm, they felt like they were at this point when they were ready to expand to, let's say, the masses, right? From serving an early adopter, largely technical persona to serving more of a broad, less technical audience. And so to connect with that audience, they did things like streamline their user interface, update features and integrations to be a bit more simple, even tweak their value prop and marketing positioning. So like one of the examples that she provided to me was they changed their product terminology. So the actual words they were using inside of their product and the visual components to more closely reflect well-known players like Zapier. And by leveraging the exposure that Zapier had already, that sped up onboarding for new users who were generally more familiar with other solutions in the category. And going through this whole process, it really highlighted the need for better alignment between marketing and product. And that was ultimately the catalyst for what their unique story is, in my opinion, which was bringing product and marketing together as one team under one leader. And once they were together, they decided, okay, the user journey, right? This starts with when people first hear about Unito, up through the point when they start using the product and eventually fully adopt it. And that can't be owned by one team or one person, right? It's very it really spans every function. But at Unito, given their business model, primarily marketing and product. So once they decided they were going to own that together, they kind of got rid of every handoff that they had in place prior, and co-owned every stage of it. So there are a few things that they benefited from bringing these teams together. One, your product can learn about cohorts of new users by looking at touch points and moments of engagement before they sign up, right? So you get, like, I have firsthand experience with this. We have 1,000 people start a trial 1 month and 2,000 people start a trial the next month. The first month you'd expect, okay, we've got this conversion rate of, I don't know, 5%. We're going to have 50 signups. And the next month we get 2,000 people. You'd expect we're going to get 100 signups, but no, we only had a 3% conversion rate this month. Why is that? Well, maybe in the second month, the sources of where those folks came from, the level of familiarity they had with our product, et cetera, were not as high quality, right? So then you have to take all of these things into consideration from the first marketing touch point, the campaigns you're running, all the way through the product experience. So looking at that as a whole helped both of those teams be a lot better at their jobs and guiding people through the journey. Community, social, website content, all those first few interactions have a big impact on what somebody's expectations are when they get into a product and how they want to be treated. And so these are all things that a product team will take into consideration when designing the product experience. They're also sharing tools and intelligence. For example, they use the same recruitment tool for user research. They both take part in product and marketing user interviews, and they combine and consolidate those insights and share them as one organization, right? And my biggest takeaway from this story is product, marketing, sales, support. These are all internal functions. Your users don't know or care how you structure your organization, right? Take a step back, open your mind, think critically about whether or not your organization's designed to deliver the best possible user experience, or if you're doing it in this way because it's the way it's always been done, right? So yeah, wrapping this one up, just think about how you might rethink the organization and how your teams are structured to deliver the optimal user experience. Okay. The next one, not unlike Unito, Brightidea. Well, the company is quite different, but their primary catalyst for moving toward PLG was also TAM expansion. Right, they built a $10 million business, selling I think 50 to 75K deals to enterprises. That was reflected in their sales process. They had a 4 to 6 month long sales cycle, and their product was fairly complex because they had lots of white glove service and handholding. So Matt, their CEO, knew that in order to scale up to 100 million, which is their new target, they're going to have to expand who they sell to. And they needed to, in order to do that, they needed to meet the needs of small and medium businesses as well, right? And they tried to do that, but they were running the same sales process at the SMB price point, which they had determined would be $50 a user per month. And that meant that CAC was through the roof, certainly not sustainable. And without like really heavy hand-holding, the product was way too complicated to adopt. So to tackle that problem, they took a pretty interesting approach. They needed to keep the business running, right? They couldn't sacrifice the kind of consistent enterprise motion they had, but they knew they had to explore this new market as well. So he introduced a team specifically dedicated to exploring like product-led growth opportunities. He called it the Innovation Lab. So this was a 5-person team internally. He put one of his best executives on it. He described that it was kind of like a Y Combinator startup. And this team reported directly to the CEO, so they wouldn't get tangled up in, any politics or anything like that. And they regularly shared their learnings as they went through this process. They shared it with the entire company. They brought each team along for the ride, gradually kind of getting everybody to think a little bit more about growth and experimentation. And then through plenty of research, trial and error, team delivered a plan that the whole organization was confident in, partly because they had collected so much data and tried, ran so many experiments and learned a lot, but also because they brought everybody along for the ride. And so once they delivered this plan, they dissolved the team, reintegrated every member of the team back into the organization, back to kind of the teams that they actually came from or fit most appropriately on. And then that also helped accelerate this culture shift necessary to succeed with the product-led motion. My biggest takeaway from this story was it's possible to transform an established business without completely disrupting it, right? It's very, very important to be focused on this and have it as a top priority, but that doesn't mean it has to be the top priority of your entire organization. It can be the top priority of a small unit of your organization that proves things out before you end up scaling them and make it the focus of the entire organization, right? If Matt had chosen to make PLG the focus of the entire org, or he had it as a part-time focus for everybody, it probably wouldn't have worked, right? So I thought his approach to kind of running this experiment in parallel with the existing business was really interesting and was very successful approach for them.
Regarding that, I mean, did you hear that there were any issues with kind of communication towards the customers in terms of like the messaging that they were putting forward, since they were moving down market? So it kind of, I would assume that the message would be a little different. So did that confuse the audience or their customers at all?
So much like they kind of isolated this group within the organization, they also were very deliberate about the user segments that they isolated. So they would basically siphon off the best fit for their experiments and program prospects into their funnel, and they would basically create this alternative experience. So short answer to that question is I think because they did it in such a regimented experiment driven way with controls and proper segmentation, I think they were able to do it successfully. Certainly if you were just running an A/B test on your website and had two very different messages and go-to-market motions, that could be confusing. So much like the way they organized it internally by being very specific about who's running the show and what their mission is, I think they took the same approach with the audience segments, and that's how they avoided that issue.
Yeah, so they siloed it first until they were sure of the metrics and it's going to work out. Then they kind of broke it out to the whole company. Yeah,
absolutely. Yep. Cool. So I got two more stories, all a little bit different. This one's Vidyard, so smaller, actually larger org than Brightidea, but they're a little bit more interesting in the sense that the way that they introduced their freemium experience was pretty unique. So if you don't know Vidyard, they're an online video platform for business, and in their early days, CMOs were their primary buyers. But over time, they noticed buying power beginning to shift to the end user, as we're all seeing, right? And in response to that, they knew they needed to change their go-to-market strategy and their product as well. So when I spoke to Ashton, who was a product manager there, I think she's somewhere else now. But what I found most interesting was how they approached their free self-serve product experience. So they actually experimented with a full platform trial a while back, but it didn't work out. When they looked back at why, it was pretty easy to see. They were dropping their users into a big, complex enterprise solution that was not designed to be self-serve, right? This happens a lot. I've done it before. I've seen it happen. It rarely works out. They were the users of it were overwhelmed by the product, and they weren't making a good impression, which had negative impact even beyond, right? Because if you have a lot of people having this negative impression of your product, think about the impact of word of mouth, right? So there are negative implications of exposing large volumes of people to subpar experiences as well. Just keep that in mind. So obviously they knew the product needed to evolve if they wanted to lead with the free self-serve experience. So they revisited it with two core beliefs. One was simple solutions, get users to the aha moment faster. Aha moment, you might have also heard of activation moment, right? This is a moment in your application when users realize value for the first time. There's a ton of content out there about that. Happy to talk about it more in the future, but their idea was we got to make it really simple to get there. So they embraced this kind of less is more philosophy and created a minimum solution that only included the features and functionality that a new user needed to reach that aha moment. And if the feature or the capability didn't relate to getting the user to that aha moment, they stripped it out. Just made it super, super simple and straightforward. The second core philosophy here was your free offer should deliver sustained value. So they were definitely looking to deliver a freemium product that you could get value from ongoing. And what they said in the beginning was, if a user can't stay on the free offer forever, then it's probably not a good enough free offer. Right? So that's what they were thinking going into this. Once they completed the work on that, they launched version 2, right, of their freemium offer instead of a trial. And they did it in stealth mode by using a different brand name to launch it. They did it because they wanted to test the waters, kind of work through the best way to operate a free solution without impacting larger accounts in their business, right? And the second test was a lot more successful than the first. They focused on self-serve, and they delivered a very, very simple way to get to that aha moment. And once they realized that users were getting there, seeing the value, and continuing to use the free product, they brought it back under the Vidyard umbrella and now introduced that as their freemium offer that you see today. So I thought this was pretty interesting because one, they tried a couple different scopes of the freemium product, which I would highly encourage everybody to do. There's no one way to do this thing. And then two, because they kind of similar to the innovation lab story at Brightidea, they didn't want to completely disrupt their larger enterprise business. So they introduced the freemium as a stealth product under a different name to see how it would work before they disrupted the business, before they took that risk. So my takeaways from this were, first of all, if you don't succeed, try again, right? You're going to fail. Just make sure that you learn when you do. And then again, don't slap a free trial on an enterprise grade product. It doesn't work, or rarely ever works. And then the last story I have is from Mixpanel. So Mixpanel is interesting because, Mixpanel they really started out as a PLG company with a freemium option many, many years ago. I talked to Neil, who heads up product and design there. And he told me the story. So, they started with a free trial, or no, sorry, it was a freemium option, right? That was how the majority of their users were using their product. And then about 4 to 5 years into the business, things were going really well, but they had big growth goals, and their investors were kind of getting hungry for faster growth and bigger deals. Surprise, surprise. And they introduced an enterprise sales team. And in the beginning, it was really successful, right? We've seen this before. You layer on an enterprise go-to-market, you start to bring in some big deals, growth skyrockets pretty quickly. But ultimately, what happened was after about 1 to 2 years, they started hitting some roadblocks because the product really wasn't scaling to support enterprise organizations. They had built it as this freemium, more transactional product. And because they were still pursuing the high touch model, and product adoption wasn't growing, they decided, okay, we got to kind of rethink our game plan. We have a product that was more built for freemium in the early days. Over the last few years, we've been kind of covering up the flaws in the product with this enterprise sales model and high touch service and support. And at this point, we're not really that great at either of them. So he boiled down the discussion they had to, are we trying to build a machine, or are we trying to build an army? He considers a PLG more of a machine and a sales team more of an army. There's no right or wrong decision here, but if you aren't careful, like I said, the army kind of patches over the problems in your machine, and then the machine stops functioning the way it needs to. So instead of focusing on the go-to-market motion, PLG, and getting back to that, the company announced to the entire organization last year that moving forward, the number one priority was going to be earning customer loyalty. So they unveiled a new primary metric, their North Star metric. It's proprietary to them. It's called Learning User Verified, or LOVE for short, and that very much connects back to wanting to earn the loyalty of their customers. And then what that is it's a metric based on a combination of activation and adoption. So both getting users on board and then making sure they stay there. L stands for learning. Like I said, users consider learning when they define a query in Mixpanel 3 out of 7 days each week, right? So this is just what they saw as regular, consistent user behavior. And then, they kind of each one of these learning user verified had this own metric attached to it, and all boiled up to this. And every team is now using this new North Star metric that is really driven by the adoption of the product and usage of the product to drive every team's behavior. So once they started doing this, the whole company got focused really on usability, UX, delighting users, and they restructured some of their teams, especially in marketing and product, and gave each team a mission specific to a market segment and which products, freemium or premium products, that they were going to be focused on. Really what I like about this story is, they started with this machine, this product-led growth machine, layered on sales, and I forgot about how important it was to keep the machine humming, the self-serve machine humming, because they had this enterprise go-to-market motion, and ended up in this no man's land of, hey, we've got this great go-to-market motion with a product that doesn't do great for enterprises, and we had this machine that used to work for SMB and mid-market, and it's degrading. What do we do now? They got focused on really adoption and adoration of their product, and it's all about the user experience, and that shaped not only their entire organization, but all of their priorities in terms of goals and metrics as well. So regardless of your go-to-market motion, your business model, few things drive success, business success and growth, more than delivering a user experience that meets and exceeds expectations. That's my takeaway here. Even if you started and have to kind of revisit later down the road, it is important to come back to that sentiment, regardless of your business model. Okay. So that does it for my PLGC stories. I have one more story to share. It's my own story. Before I do that, Timo, are there any questions or comments before I move on?
Yeah, there was one question regarding the aha moment, since you mentioned it. A question related to simulated aha moments for products which bring actual value later on. So I think the person asking the question is bringing up Calendly as a kind of a example of that, but I don't know if that's such a good example, but because I think Calendly you use it immediately. At least I did, and so I kind of got the value
Yeah.
quite fast. But in terms of like products which are difficult to get to the actual value immediately, what could you do? Is there possibility?
Yeah. I'll give two examples. One, my last company, we were building basically an e-commerce focused CRM and marketing automation platform. And the biggest roadblock we were running into with rapid adoption of our product and getting to an activation moment or aha moment was that you had to get all of this data into the system before you had, so it was very much about behavioral driven personalization. So until you had behavioral data in there, you couldn't really experience the full value of the product, right? So that was getting all the data in there was a huge hurdle and very hard to do self-service. So what we did was we actually didn't make changes to the product at this point. The fastest way that we found to get the user to value was by rethinking how we were onboarding folks. So instead of thinking, okay, the first thing we need to do is have everybody get data, all the data they need into the system. That's the number one priority because that unlocks everything else. We rethought it and said, okay, we want to show people value in the first day or two. How can we do that without thinking about all the data that's required to experience the full value of the product? So I don't know if you're familiar with e-commerce at all, but there's this concept of like an abandoned cart email. When you put something in your shopping cart and you get an email later on says you left something. So you don't need data. You don't need a whole lot of data to do that. It's one data point. Somebody put something in a cart and that's tracked when they do it. So what we decided to do is the first thing we're going to get every new customer to do is set up these transactional triggered emails that don't require all that data. Even though it's not the full experience or the full value that our product can deliver, they're going to send an email and potentially capture some revenue within the first few days. So just kind of rethinking how your product can deliver value. It doesn't need to be everything. Like just even thinking about user onboarding, right? Don't show your entire product when somebody first gets in there. You want to show them, kind of point them to a specific moment where they're going to realize some value. It's the same regardless if you're thinking of an in-product experience or customer success experience. Just get creative with how you can show value as quickly as possible. It may not be what you think it is today.
Yeah, Niels Lagerson is sending a comment here that you could, how about, or asking a question, I suppose, how about giving access to a pre-configured environment?
Yeah, there are some tools that there's some tools out there that I think have come to market over the last year or two. You can create an interactive demo without having an actual trial or freemium product. I've seen like even Amplitude, if you're familiar with them, product analytics, they've got the empty state problem. If you logged in, created a new account and you don't have data in there, what are you going to be looking at? What they do is they fill new accounts with dummy data. So you can go around and see kind of what it looks like and how the data populates and how you can manipulate the charts and all that. And then you can clear that data and add your own in. But it shows you, the experience of using the product without having to overcome that hurdle of getting all your data into the system.
Yeah. And I
Cool.
don't know how have you seen this, but have you seen any companies actually provide kind of access to kind of vertical specific, if they're serving multiple verticals at the same time, access to vertical specific aha moments in a sense, or
Yes.
kind of direct them to different paths in the products? Have you seen that?
Yeah,
Common?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. So not only vertical specific, but also persona. So I think this could easily be applied to verticals as well, but I'll just give an example from a conversation I had yesterday with one of our customers. This customer called Tempo, and they're a time tracking. They built a time tracking app for Jira, and so they've got these people. They've got kind of three big personas in their product. One are the people who have to just log time. That's their primary use case. Another, executives who really just care about the reporting on the time, and then another, these administrators who care about account setup and privileges and all of that. And so when these three different personas get into the product, their aha moments are different, as you can imagine, right? And what they do this with Appcues, but you can build this with your own product as well. Just have people self-select, right? So when you get in, what are you trying to do today? Or, what's your title, et cetera, and then based on that response, tailor the next steps from there. And I think Twilio does a really good job with this. We have some content on our blog about Twilio's onboarding experience, where it's kind of we call it choose your own adventure, or you kind of self-select into an experience that's tailored to you.
If you're an early stage company though, I mean, what would you say? Would it make sense to focus on kind of making these separate paths, or is there something else that you should, or should you just pick one and kind of I suppose focus on that first to get to the early sense of how to do this PLG wise?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to assume in that scenario you're very resource constrained, right? You're trying to
exactly.
You don't want to try to do too much, right? So absolutely, the first thing I'd recommend you do is figure out who's the most important persona, who's the most common persona, and build for them. Take it from there.
Exactly. Very good.
Cool. So this is the last story I'm going to walk through. I'm going to do it fairly quickly since we're coming up on time. It's just my own personal experience with PLG, and so I just wanted to just talk through this concept about how product led, or how these new expectations and how the kind of ubiquity of free trials and freemium have influenced the kind of the role that product has to play in the buying process. So, this is kind of the old way the funnel looked. I know the funnel is a little outdated. We're talking about flywheels now. We've got our own flywheel we talk about, but just for sake of trying to make this point, this is kind of how the way that things used to look, and it sounds like for some of you maybe still does to a degree, right? This is maybe changing a little bit, but you've got advertising and search generating some awareness. Ultimately, these people are probably talking to their peers and reading reviews, filling out a form, talking to sales, signing a contract. At some point, they're going to get into the product, and once they get in there, hopefully they start using it, right? And so I started thinking about, like, what would this look like in a product-led world? So you're offering a free trial or freemium product, let's say, and while the first couple stages look pretty similar, you start to see the product creep up into the initial stage, playing an expanded role, right? And people are finding your business, reading through your website, looking at third-party reviews, and as a final step of that consideration phase, getting into intent, they want to get their hands on the product. And this is what my theory was. In that same survey I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, we asked the same people, what were your preferences when it comes to, or what was your level of familiarity with products when you start using them for the first time? We asked these a couple different ways, but just about half the respondents indicated that they registered for free trials and premium products with the objective of learning about what the product does. And we asked the question another way and found that only 27% of people who start using freemium and free products are familiar with how the product solves their problem. And so to me, that was, most people who are starting to use your product don't really even know what the product does. They may understand the basic value prop, probably got them in there in the first place, but when they start using the product, more often than not, they don't know what it does or really how it works. And so people are diving into products before they know much about them at all. And that's why I ended up changing that graphic to look like this. So, based on that data, kind of proposing that the product experience is now playing a role up in the interest stage of the funnel. They're probably finding your brand similar ways, right? Advertising, search, et cetera, maybe content. They maybe spend a few minutes learning on your website, and then at that point, they're going to start using your product to continue their education. And in this scenario, product obviously has some new jobs to do, and the first of which is a little education and marketing, right? So before we had these survey results, this is my own little case study, and before we really dug into our own data, we formed this hypothesis that people were starting trials before they knew what the product did, based on their behaviors. And so we dug into Google Analytics, found that quite a high percentage of new trialers started as new website visitors who only viewed 1 to 2 pages of the website before creating their trial account. If you use GA, I'm sure most of you do, you can use this reverse goal path functionality. And if you don't have new account creation set up as a goal, go do it now, because they don't do that retroactively. So anyway, we looked at this path, and we knew that the first job that our product needed to do was ensure that new users understood what we did. And when we prioritized that, we felt like we could motivate those users to actually take action, help them realize the value, maybe not faster, because we were going to try to do a little bit more, but get them to that aha moment without introducing too much additional friction. quick note, we're in a pretty unique position to teach our users about our own product because we're using our own product to teach them about it. But anyway, we asked the question, when we were designing this, we asked the question, what does Appcues do? We just kind of want to step back. What does Appcues do? We had our own ways of talking about this, but through a user's eyes. And when you boil it down, at the end of the day, like all the marketing jargon aside, we make it really easy to build these patterns in app and deliver them without a developer. And so the action we want people to take is actually build something with Appcues. Once they see how easy it is and how custom they can make them, that's when we've shown them the first value experience. And so if we could show them the result with those patterns and basically make the CTA on the patterns to build this thing you're looking at right now, that could really work. And ultimately we saw some great results from it. These numbers look fake because they're so round. I think it was like 20, I think it was 32 point something and 33 point something, but we actually saw an increase in activation rate, how many people got to that aha moment, and surprisingly, a decrease in time to value, or how quickly people got from account creation to that aha moment. And we believe through some surveys and our own observations that because people better understood what they were getting into as soon as they got dropped into the product, even though there were some more steps to get, they got there. About how product-led has kind of shifted my thinking about the role that product has to play, marketing's collaborative product, etc. So hopefully you found this story and the other shared earlier pretty valuable. My key takeaways from this are, from these stories, some that I did not share as well. Data rules. Now in product-led, data drives everything. There's volume. You can use science to make decisions. If you're not tracking key events in your app today, start doing it now. 2, expect some sales friction. Sales teams are scared of product-led. It can ultimately be good for them. There are a lot of great examples about that. Read about them and convince them. Design your trial or free plan thoughtfully. There are lots of ways you can do this. It doesn't just mean making your existing product free for 14 days. Be creative about showcasing the value of your product and making sure it's not too complex or distracting from what you're trying to get them to do. 4, lines between functions can blur. Rethink your org. Be creative. How can you deliver the best possible experience? If that means combining product and marketing, because that user journey is really owned by both functions before and during the experience of using your product, do it. That's important. This is how you will win, delivering a great user experience. Okay. 2 more. 1, beware ownership gaps. If you introduce a trial in between, getting leads for the sales team and the sales team actually selling, who owns that? Is there a gap? Is there this no man's land where there's a lack of ownership and a lack of accountability? If so, address it immediately. Every step in that journey needs to be owned, whether it be by multiple teams or one. And then lastly, persist. This is a difficult transformation for a lot of companies to make. It's new for a lot of folks. There's a lot to learn, but the companies who have been successful with it are thriving. So, keep at it. I don't think there's really a choice here. At some point, we're all going to have to kind of come to terms with this is the way that people want to buy and use software, and we got to do our best to meet those new expectations. And that'll wrap it for me.
Good. Okay, I think we're done with that. So thanks a lot, everybody. This is the last day of SaaS Camp, as mentioned, but we'll be back next year once again. Thank you, Eric, so much for coming along and taking the time with this. And yeah, have a great
thank you again.
Afternoon over there, or morning, I suppose, over there.
Yeah.
Very good.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.